Welcome into a new edition of the Sports Hub Patriots podcast, kind of training camp edition, really preseason edition, taking a look at what we learned in the Patriots preseason opener against the Houston Texans. I'm Alex Barth from 98.5 thesportshub.com. Joining us to break down this one from MassLive, Mark Daniels. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex.
And finally, real football. Let's just start there. I think with the rise in joint practices, and there's a lot of talk about how important those are, and then we just naturally hype up the padded practices leading into the game. I think it gets lost at times how important, how meaningful just an actual game is compared to any kind of practice. How do you weigh, last night's performances versus maybe some of the stuff we saw even in the padded practices?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think last night might have been really the first time we got to see defensive linemen, offensive linemen in action. It was probably the first time we kind of got to see running backs, because with the CBA and the way the NFL works now, the padded practices aren't really full contact, right? We get some one-on-ones here and there, but it's been really hard for me to even evaluate how the offensive linemen look because I'm like, they're not really getting hit by defensive linemen all that much in practice. And maybe there's been 4 or 5 padded practices up to this point. So when the game starts and I say how it's going, my first reaction was, man, the Patriots offensive linemen need more practice. And it's not completely on them. Like the Patriots are following and abiding by the NFL rules, but that first preseason game, it was just so rough at certain points. And I think you could even say it for the Texans offensive line, like CJ Stroud got battered by the Patriots a little bit, but I think with the way everything is set up, it's just more difficult for offensive linemen, especially young ones, to sort of get going. And that was a big takeaway for me. It was nice, some of the things we saw. I mean, obviously, Malik Cunningham was a lot of fun, a highlight play here or there. I think, if anything, Patriots fans should be rest assured that most of the people who played on Thursday night won't be playing come week 1, especially in offense. And that's probably the best thing because it didn't look great, right? It looked pretty bad. But hey, how many players who played on offense will actually play against the Eagles in week 1? Not many, maybe 2.
So that to me is kind of the big question. And I think a lot of people's biggest takeaway last night was, oh no, this offensive line, they were down either 4 or 5 starters, depending on what happens at right tackle. But how do you kind of hedge that look brutal versus, their backups? They're not going to play week 1, but this is a line that does have some injury concerns, and it's not unrealistic to think at least some of those guys will play at some point.
Yeah, I think the offensive line for me, especially the tackle spot, has been the biggest concern all off season, right? I didn't love what happened last year. And, sort of rewind here, Mac Jones got hurt in week 1 when 2 defenders off the edge in Miami crushed him. He had a back injury. He actually played hurt in week 2 in Pittsburgh. Go to week 3, he gets injured again because Calais Campbell lands on his ankle. Go to week 4, Brian Hoyer gets knocked out because Rashawn Gary isn't blocked by Isaiah Wynn. So you have 3 quarterback injuries in 4 weeks, really because of your offensive line in 2022. And that set up the Patriots for disaster the rest of the way. So the season ends and we're all saying tackle. They're going to get more tackles. And they sort of get these journeymen, Calvin Anderson, Riley Reif. I didn't love it, but when they did it, what did we all say? The draft. They're going to draft a tackle. And the one guy they draft is Sidney So, who played guard at Eastern Michigan. I don't love it. I didn't love it then. I haven't loved what I've seen from the group. My only hope is that Cole Strange comes back, Michael Oweno comes back, Trent Brown gets healthy and plays motivated, because when those guys are healthy, they shouldn't be bad. But the big question for me is right tackle. Connor McDermott has been playing right tackle for most of camp with the top unit. He played left tackle last night, and it was a disaster. He looked like one of the worst offensive linemen on the field. I'm like, oh, is he really going to start? Or are you going to start Riley Reif, who's been sort of Connor McDermott's backup? So how do I feel about it? Well, I hope everyone's healthy, and I hope the tackles magically get better on the right side, because the last thing Mac Jones needs is to be hit 1.5 seconds or suffer an injury in week 1 and then again in week 3. It's great to have Bill O'Brien. I think Mac Jones will be improved. You have more weapons on offense. It won't matter if they can't run block or pass protect.
So at that right tackle spot specifically, you mentioned the Riley Reif signing. We came into camp and we are like, all right, it's going to be a battle. Him and Connor McDermott, and Reif seemed like the ingrained starter the first few days of camp. It was like day 3 or 4. Suddenly Connor McDermott starts repping over him. Then Trent Brown stopped practicing, so it made it tough to tell because you had Riley Reif on the left side, McDermott on the right. But I'm not saying it would be surprising if Reif has totally lost the starting job. But for him to be among the group of veterans that didn't play last night, like the Veterans Day Off guys, that surprised me, because you had guys like Jalen Mills playing, on the defensive side of the ball, Mack Wilson. Is Riley Reif ahead of them in terms of job security? I wouldn't think so. So I didn't think he was going to play wire to wire last night or anything. I was
Yeah.
really surprised that they felt he didn't need to play last night.
Yeah, Riley Reef is someone who's looked like he's needed to play. And you're right. Actually in minicamp too, like in OTAs, Riley Reef looked like the starting right tackle. But by minicamp, Connor McDermott looked like he passed him on the depth chart. And you're right. It's the same thing in camp. After like day 2 or 3, Connor McDermott passed Riley Reef again. So I'm thinking, all right, Riley Reef, who is your second highest paid tackle on the team, it looks like he's going to be your third main backup, your swing tackle, whatever you want to call it. The fact he didn't play last night was interesting. I wonder if some of that is just the Patriots sort of know what they have in him. He's been around for a long time. Maybe he doesn't need it. Maybe he doesn't need these types of reps. Maybe they want to keep him healthy. Maybe also they just wanted to give City So a chance on the right side and give Connor McDermott a chance to play sort of out of position on the left side. Maybe that's what it was about. But you're right. I think that right tackle spot is just so interesting to me because everywhere you look on offense, receiver, running back, like there are some depth issues here and there, running back being a big one. But you have Ramondre Stevenson, you have Hunter Henry, you have Mike Gesicki, Juju Smith-Schuster. You know who's starting for you. But at right tackle, I'm not very confident in that spot really whatsoever.
So now speaking of the offensive line, we have to play this tough game of, you still got to evaluate the other players, but how much can you do? Let's start with the quarterback. What did you think of Bailey Zappi last night, given what, the opportunities he had?
Yeah, such a hard time to evaluate him, right? I mean, what more really could he have done? He had no time to throw in the pocket. You couldn't set up the run. You couldn't run it on 3rd and short or 4th and 1. It was sort of a disaster. He made a really nice throw and a nice read to Tyquan Thornton. That wasn't a shock to me. Him and Tyquan have a really good connection. They came in the same rookie class. And I think in camp, I'm trying to think, Tyquan Thornton has caught only one pass from Mac Jones in full teams drills. Everything else has come from Bailey Zappi. So there's a connection there. So that was a nice moment. It was rough though. I think the entire game was rough, really, until on offense at least, until our guy Malik Magic, Malik Madness, Malik the Magnificent, Malik Cunningham looked awesome, and it would have been great to have some of that magic, some of that Zappy fever come back. It just didn't happen. I don't know how much I blame him. I will say this though, I've been a little underwhelmed with Bailey Zappi this offseason. I wasn't impressed with him last year in training camp. I mean, I think a lot of us forget he got beat out by Brian Hoyer for the top backup job. And Hoyer gets injured, and Zappi was just wonderful for the 4 games he played last year. He really stepped it up. He's really a gamer. And I was wondering if he would sort of be like Jimmy Garoppolo. Like back in the day, Jimmy Garoppolo threw interception after interception in practice. But in the preseason, he lit it up. Unfortunately, we didn't quite see that from Bailey Zappi. I was hoping for more, but it's hard for me to dock him just because the front is so bad. What are you going to say if you can't pass, protect, or run block? It's kind of like, whatever. It's the preseason. Hopefully it gets better.
All right. You mentioned Malik Cunningham. I think a lot of people are excited about him today to different extents. We've seen anywhere from, all right, I think he's earned a roster spot, to no, he should be QB2 over Zappi, to the occasional, Mac Jones' job's in trouble. Here comes Malik Cunningham. Obviously what he did is impressive. I don't want to take away what he did. He led a drive when nobody else could in that game. That all being said, contextualize for us what Malik Cunningham did last night.
Man, Malik Cunningham started the game playing snaps at receiver. Let's put that in perspective. He was running routes. He's never played receiver in his life. And really, for all the practices we've seen, for the first 10 days of camp, receiver only. Mini camp OT is really receiver only. Some walkthrough stuff here or there, quarterback. The last 2 days of camp, we actually saw Malik Cunningham playing 11 on 11s as a quarterback. So I'm like, oh, they're getting him ready for a little bit here. But the way he played, it was really exciting, right? He's a dynamic, different style type runner. I mean, he looked up to Lamar Jackson, which is why he went to Louisville, and you see it in his game. He's like he's not Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was a 1st-round pick. Malik Cunningham's an undrafted free agent, who the Patriots are trying to transition to a new position. However, his skill set makes it so interesting. I think you have to keep Malik Cunningham on the 53-man roster. 1, you want to develop him as that next Julian Edelman. Fine, take your time to do it. But 2, he can be your scout team quarterback and help you, when you're going up against a guy like Jalen Hurts in week 1, get him in there, let the defense chase him around. I really like that aspect of the game, and it's to have a prospect like that. And let's be honest, he's not the youngest guy. I actually looked it up. He was at Louisville for 6 years. He's going to turn 25 this fall. But you know what? There's something to be said about the speed and athleticism. And I do wonder if Bill O'Brien can have some fun with him. So playing in the 4th quarter of a preseason game against a bunch of guys who probably won't make the Texans, I thought he looked great. I think he'll earn a spot on this roster. He'll keep that undrafted streak alive. I do not know if we'll ever see him in a game this year. Maybe some bit roles here or there, but I think behind the scenes, developing him with the new position and getting the defense ready, it'd be kind of cool. It'd be a cool story to see unfold here.
The one interesting thing about keeping him on the 53, and I'm starting to trend that way as well, is there is that new rule about the emergency quarterback where you can dress 3 quarterbacks on game day. And if you designate one the emergency quarterback, it doesn't count against your game day total. Now, that player can't play unless the other 2 quarterbacks get hurt. You'd say, all right, so then what's the point of designating Malik Cunningham? To me, for him, if he wants to see time, he's got to get to the point where they'd be, as a passer, where they'd be comfortable enough that Mac Jones, your starting quarterback, Malik Cunningham is your backup, quote unquote. Bailey Zappi is the emergency quarterback. And then Cunningham, you can bring him in and out of the game at will to run package stuff or gadget stuff. And then, if Mac Jones really gets hurt, your week-to-week backup could still be Bailey Zappi. Like that, to me, is kind of should be the end game here for Malik Cunningham and the Patriots.
That's interesting. It's funny watching him last night. I said to myself, like, oh, why do they have Trace McSorley on the team, right? Like why not give those quarterback reps to Malik Jackson in practice? And then it sort of hit me. Well, Trace McSorley runs the Patriots offense honestly better than Malik Cunningham can, right? So when you're evaluating some of these Trey Nixon, Tyreek Pitts, some of these guys who won't make the team a receiver, you want a quarterback in practice who can run the offense the way Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi can. So I think that's why it's interesting because, as a passer, Malik Cunningham is not running the same offense as Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones. It might be a flash in the pan type guy that we see here that, we forget about in 2 years. But right now it's exciting. As someone who grew up loving like Michael Bishop, it's kind of cool. And I think for a preseason story, it's really great. But yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what they do with him here and out. And I honestly am hoping last preseason game, let him go the four quarters, give us something to root for.
I would hope so. I don't need to watch any more Trace McSorley. I've seen enough of him. And like you said, Cunningham's exciting. He's fun to watch. It's a little different than any quarterback the Patriots had, even in terms of a preseason guy, that true dual threat option quarterback. Definitely fun to watch last night. You kind of mentioned some of the receivers there. Again, tough night to evaluate them because there wasn't really time to throw. There were a couple times I saw guys like Keion White get open, but by the time he's open, Bailey Zappi's already bailing out of the pocket. If anything, the wide receiver we learned the most about, or at least I feel this way, Mark, is a guy who didn't play, is Demario Douglas. Really got one series, sort of got a veterans night off. Is it possible the Patriots are as high on Douglas internally as we are externally?
Absolutely. I think he's making the 53-man roster. I think at this point it's a lock. I don't think the Patriots really need to evaluate him much at all. I mean, honestly, he started taking reps with Mac Jones in the spring, and I thought that was shocking. I mean, they started dialing up type plays, and the type of plays they were running and they might run for Demario Douglas is like the Marcus Jones type plays around the line of scrimmage, jet sweeps, end around, stuff like that. They'll probably use him as a backup returner in the punt and kickoff teams. But I think one, they don't want to show anyone how they want to use him. But two, I think he's already locked in, and I imagine he'll play more when Mac and Bailey play a little bit over the next week. Like I heard Mac Jones is probably going to play in Green Bay. I think it's still up in the air, but that's my expectation. Okay. So, I think he's already on the team. I think they've seen enough, which is pretty wild for, a 5'8", 6th-round pick. But, when you see Mac out there at side sessions in training camp and it's Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, and then Demario Douglas, you're like, wow, like, is this guy ahead of Tyquan Thornton on the depth chart? I mean, they play kind of different positions in the offense, but his development this offseason has been one of the biggest surprises for me. But yeah, man, I think he's locked in and ready for week 1.
Of the wide receivers who did play, anybody stand out to you last night?
It's hard. I was happy to see Tyquan Thornton do something. He needs to get, I think, his confidence back. He needs to stay healthy. It's a tough spot he's in. And sort of, I think Tyquan Thornton's at a disadvantage, right? Because the Patriots traded up for him. They probably overdrafted him, and they drafted him ahead of George Pickens, who's really good. Alec Pierce in Indianapolis, who's even a pretty good receiver as well. So people are going to judge him, and he's going to be judged because, he was drafted ahead of who he was drafted. He can't control that. I don't think he can control his developing in this offense and trying to work his way up. But as you've seen as well, he started training camp behind Kendrick Bourne on the depth chart, and now Kendrick Bourne's past him, and sort of he's been demoted to the second team. So I think making that catch last night, I hope we see more from him going out there. Other than that, yeah, it's hard. I was hoping to see more out of Keion White, but what are you going to do when the offensive line is doing what it was doing? Hopefully we see more. I think right. Keion White is a guy who has intriguing potential. He has like an NFL type body. It looks like he could go play and catch a couple of passes in a regular season game right now. He just has to do a little bit more before securing that 53 spot.
And just on Thornton, you mentioned making that catch and building the momentum. That specific kind of catch, high pointing the ball, holding on through contact with the ground. Like those are the things that specifically he struggled with in camp that he needs to be better at. So not just making a big catch, but I think some of the individual skill sets he put on display were things that we've been wanting to see. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. And I know everybody wants to talk about Malik Cunningham today, but to me, the most impressive rookie of the night for the Patriots was Keon White. This is where maybe the week 1 preseason overreaction kicks in for me, but I think they have a real hit here.
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots' first 3 hits, you go back to it thinking the spring, and it's like, first 3 rounds, why are you going defense? Like, right? Like, their offense stunk last year. Why are they going defense? And all of a sudden, you look at it. Christian Gonzalez is a starting outside cornerback probably already. Keon White looked just, he's like, you say like grown man, that's Keon White. He talks like he's a 30-year-old veteran. He played like it last night. He's super strong. He's athletic. He can play inside the defensive line on the edge. I was really impressed with him. I'm impressed with even how he talks about football. Again, he came into the league essentially like he's been playing for the last 8 years, but it looks like they have really 2 good first and second round picks on defense and guys they might be able to build around. And then there's, Marte Mapu, who we haven't seen. He's still not cleared for contract due to having surgery on his pec. But him too, as he's flashed in training camp. I mean, it's quite possible they have 3 guys in the first 3 rounds that are going to help their defense for the next like 4, maybe more years, and that's huge. I wrote today for MassLive just the rich get richer in terms of the Patriots defense. Like they return every starter other than Devin McCourty, and they had 3 rookies, 2 who we saw last night who look like they're going to make an instant impact. Yeah, man, sign me up on Keon White. I'm very, very impressed with him.
And of that group you mentioned, I want to get into Christian Gonzalez in a second, but you talk about building a core. Keon White, defensive line. I know Marte Mapu, some people like to hem and haw. Is he a linebacker? Is he a safety? But he's a linebacker. And then Christian Gonzalez in the secondary. That's all 3 levels now. You have potential playmakers. Then if you extend Kyle Duggar, I mean, that's a really good young core for a defense that you can build around. On Gonzalez last night, obviously got the welcome to the NFL moment early on. Nico Collins put his shoulder right through his chest, but after that, I thought he settled down. I thought he played relatively well.
He's really smooth. Christian Gonzalez, the funny thing about him through every level of football is coaches were always like, is he running full speed? Is he putting in full effort? Because he is so naturally athletic that he does things with ease. And you kind of see it. He's so smooth when he runs. For a guy who's 6'2", 6'3", his athleticism is just off the charts. He wasn't tested much, which is what you want. I had him giving up 1 catch on like a 12-yard crossing pattern. But what's he do? He forces a fumble after the guy catches it. Exactly what you want. You're a cornerback, right? You give up the catch, we'll knock the ball out of his hands. I mean, yeah, I think the Patriots have thrown him into the fire instantly. As soon as he could play in OTAs, he was with the starters. He's been through there, since the spring. He's going to start day 1, and he profiles as a guy who could potentially be a number 1 cornerback for the Patriots. And really, they're going to need it because I think after him and Jonathan Jones, a lot hinges on Jack Jones and what's going to happen on that court date next week. Like if Jack Jones isn't available, your outside cornerback depth takes a big hit. I don't love anyone else on their roster other than those 3 guys at the outside spot. I think Marcus Jones is too short. So yeah, Christian Gonzalez, having him be able to come in and start right away is huge next to Jonathan Jones because you might need a lot of those guys if Jack Jones can't play.
I thought on Gonzalez's night, honestly, the most interesting thing was, and you talk about him being a number 1 corner, that's a 90-95% usage rate, 60+ snaps a game. They had him covering the opening kickoff. They had him out there on punt coverage, on punt return. It seems like they're going to have him play a lot on special teams too, which that's a massive workload for this team.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is you see it even like guys like Kyle Duggar. The Patriots value special teams and they want everyone learning those spots, right? You kind of saw last year, like that special teams unit going into Buffalo had a ton of injuries. Obviously, Cody Davis wasn't available, Brendan Schooler wasn't available, and the guys who had to step up really couldn't do it. So the preseason is the time to get those guys involved. I mean, Malik Cunningham didn't play in special teams last night, but he has been in training camp because even Keion White, we saw him lining up for some punts last night. Now is the time to see what they can do. But you're right. It'll be interesting to see how they go about it. I mean, hell, a guy like, Adrian Phillips cut his teeth playing special teams before really playing safety with the Patriots. But yeah, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how they deploy these guys. But man, those first 3 picks, I'm kind of thrilled right now. I think they have some good ones. Honestly, I think this class could be better than last year's.
It's hard not to get excited about it, the way they've come out between, like you said, the top 3 on defense, Keion White, the specialists who I want to get into, that we definitely need to get into. But just one more thing on the corners. You talk about that drop off after Jack Jones, and I think that's real. One guy I was hoping to see a little more from last night was Isaiah Bolden. I thought he might be emerging into that 4th boundary corner role. I know some people have said Amir Speed has popped to them as well. Did you see anything from that group, Rodney Randall, like that depth boundary corner group last night, or did they all kind of come up under the radar?
No, not yet. I think, watching them practice and like a lot of people covering the Patriots, I chart everything, every pass, every reception, every time a cornerback gives up a catch. And I'll be honest, Isaiah Bolden and Amir Speed have given up a lot of catches in training camp. If either of them are going to make the 53-man roster, it'll be because of special teams. Now, Amir Speed had a really nice play, I think as a gunner on a punt return to make a tackle. He's really good. He could make the team at special teams, but I don't see it yet. Isaiah Bolden will need to pop in the return game if he's going to make it. I think he's really raw. I think those are also guys you might be able to get on the practice squad.
Yeah, I think that those are guys you're looking at in that case as well. On the specialists, though, last night, so we've wondered kind of what's going on with this kicker battle because it's been very back and forth. It seems like Bryce Behringer is going to be the punter. We didn't get to see them attempt a field goal in the second half, so we don't know if maybe things would have switched like they did a punter, but Chad Ryland handled the kickoffs. Nick Folk took the field goal attempt. I've been getting the question a lot, I'm sure you have too, could the Patriots carry 3 kickers and essentially carry Ryland as a kickoff specialist? It's really hard to kind of see how it would score out with some of their roster crunches elsewhere on the roster, but based off what they did last night, if that was their special teams plan, that's sort of what it telegraphed, is that they're going to try to find a way to keep Folk and Ryland.
It's really interesting. Folk's a vested veteran. You could theoretically cut him and just sign him to your practice squad and elevate him. I do wonder if that's the route they ultimately go. And let's be honest, Chad Ryland's a 4th-round pick. He's the highest drafted kicker in the Bill Belichick era. They are not cutting him. Right. The only way he's not in the 53 is if he gets injured. But Nick Folk's inability to kick off is huge. You can't just have Nick Folk on this roster. We saw what happened in Buffalo. He cannot kick off. He doesn't have the leg. He's not that accurate from beyond, 40, 45. Chad Ryland has to show that he can make the easy kicks. He has to show it. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Chad Ryland can hit from 60. I'm so impressed with that kid's leg. But you're right. In the preseason, I want to see it. We need those reps. Come on, offense. Get down the field. Let the rookie kick, right? I want to see a kicker battle go on. I want to see it. And a punter, you're right. Bryce Behringer should be the guy. A little underwhelmed from last night. He shanked a punt that happened to roll 56 yards, which sort of shows you his talent. But I think Bryce Behringer is going to be a good one. And I think Chad Ryland will as well. The big question is Bill Belichick ready to give up Nick Folk? And you're right. One way is to keep them both on the roster. That would be fascinating. That would be very much like Bill Belichick to keep 3 kickers. I think the other way, which I like a little bit more, is just cut Nick Folk. And if you really want him, sign him to the practice squad. There's also a chance, too. The Patriots showcased Nick Folk to give him a chance to go somewhere else. I think Dallas might be looking for a kicker. Yeah. So, a spot like that could work out. But, yeah, it's been fascinating this summer. I love a good kicker battle, and we have 2 of them.
See, I just wonder about Folk on the practice squad because he's from Dallas. He's been commuting from Dallas to Boston, right? If he has a chance to go kick at home for more money indoors, because if he's on the Patriots practice squad, the Cowboys can just offer him a contract. Yep. So I would wonder if the plan was to get him on the practice squad, if Dallas wouldn't be able to poach him. Yeah. I almost feel like they're in a spot where it's either he's on the roster or he's not with the team.
Or hey, maybe they trade him. Right.
Or maybe they trade him. And look, if you can get something for Nick Folk, I think that's a massive win-win. Looking ahead here, and there's one position I saved I wanted to get to, but it's kind of more forward-looking at this point. Not much from the running backs last night. Kevin Harris, Pierre Strong, both struggled. I think independently of the offensive line issues, both struggled. As the team starts to ramp up more for the regular season, do you think those Ezekiel Elliott, Leonard Fournette rumors start popping back up again? Do you think we see anything to come of that based off of the running back performance last night?
100%. The Patriots need another running back. It's not a question. They need another running back. They need a veteran running back behind Ramondre Stevenson. Over at MassLive, we were told by a good source that Patriots know they can't lean on Ramondre as much as they did last year because they know what's going to happen. He's going to get worn down. He's going to get injured. Last year, I think he had 16 carries in the final 2 games. He couldn't handle a workload anymore because his ankle was so messed up. You can't have him do that again. You need a guy like Zeke. I believe they want a guy like Zeke. I believe they've offered him a contract. I haven't been able to completely lock that down, but I believe Ezekiel Elliott is waiting for either 1 or 2 things to happen, right? 1, he gets more money. Yeah. Maybe 1, he doesn't have to practice in training camp or doesn't have to go to training camp. Or 2, maybe he's just waiting for someone to see if anyone gets hurt in the preseason, right? Maybe someone goes down and they offer Zeke more money. I think Zeke is the way to go for the Patriots. They probably offered him what they think he's worth, plus incentives. I get him wanting more money, but at this point, we're in August. Take the contract, man. That'd be fun to write about. It'd be fun to, it'd be sort of fun just to see how it plays out, but they need help. And Ramondre Stevenson needs help. I also add this too. I do wonder if they sort of search for another 3rd down back. What's going on with Ty Montgomery? He's 30 years old. He can't stay healthy. I'm a little nervous about that. It's crazy to think they've been they're a couple of years removed from James White and they haven't really replaced him. I'm sure they would love it to be Pierre Strong, but I don't know if he has it in terms of the blitz pickup. That's why they leaned on Ramondre for all three downs. So, an easy way to go is to sign Zeke Elliott. Another way to go is maybe they surprise us. They bring in someone we haven't talked about who's more of a receiving back. And that way you can just lean on Ramondre for 2 downs. But man, 100%, they need a running back. Like that's up there on the priority list.
I almost wonder if you sign a guy like Zeke, does Fournette become the 3rd down back? Does the lesser snaps come from the early downs? Because he obviously showed he's capable pass catching back last year. He's a good blocker. We know that. I wonder if they would just lock that in as his role, because in terms of 3rd down backs out there right now, like Fournette can kind of catch the ball, but it's, guys like Marlon Mack have signed, Kenyon Drake have signed. It's really limited in terms of those pass catching backs right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't love the way they've done it. Honestly, I've been a little, I know they drafted 2 running backs, whatever. They drafted Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong, but even the year when like Shane Vereen left, they had James White drafted, but they brought in a bunch of other guys. It was like Travaris Cadet. They brought in Dion Lewis. So they had a little competition there. I kind of wish they did that again.
Yeah, it's probably supposed to be Ty Montgomery, right? And he can't get on the field, which is a good point. And I wonder if that's starting to, I had him on my first roster projection, but now I'm starting to wonder, the old cliche, can't make the club from the tub.
Yep.
I feel we might be trending that way with Ty Montgomery. Before we wrap it up here, Mark, Green Bay up next. Patriots will have 2 practices in Green Bay with the Packers and then obviously play them in the preseason game. What are you going to be looking for over the next week?
Let's see how this Mac Jones offense plays against the Green Bay starters in 2 days of joint practice and then in the game, right? That's what we want to see. We want to see how they look under Bill O'Brien. Like they started slow against their own defense. They turned it on. I thought they've put together a solid training camp from an offensive standpoint. It's time to see what you can do against another NFL team. I think these 2 practices will be next Wednesday, Thursday. It's going to be fascinating. I think we'll get some answers about the group. We'll get some answers about the offensive line and the weapons, right? Hunter Henry has been great in practice. Can he do it against another team? Can Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Parker do it against another team? Let's see. That's what it's all about this year, right? This offense getting back. Can they be a top 10 unit? Can Mac Jones show to be a top 15 guy again? Well, great litmus test coming up in Green Bay for sure.
He is Mark Daniels of MassLive. You can follow him on Twitter @bymarkdaniels. Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, man, appreciate it.
And I'll be back next week with reports from the road, Patriots, Packers training camp. Until then, subscribe to the Patriots audio feed and the Sports Hub YouTube channel. Till then, thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.